And welcome to week 2 of the Pigskin Picks here on Delaware Live, powered by 302 Sports. And pinch hitting for Marty is Glenn. Marty Sheehan was supposed to be on today. He's out sick. He woke up with no voice. So Glenn moved up a week. And Glenn, Jason Winslow opened the door. 5-3 last week. We all got stomped last week. I was 3-5. Trey was 5-3. First of all, talk about the crazy week of upsets.
It was a very tough week to pick games. I got pretty lucky. I also do picks for the Delaware State News, and in week 0, I only lost one game, and that was wasn't Del State, but I can't remember who it was. I only lost one game, and last week there were so many games. You just like, wow, what are you going to do? So this week looks pretty tough too. So I see why Marty got sick. He looked ahead and saw an easier schedule next week.
Maybe we'll see. I tell you what, I think the new class system has made football competitive, and that's what they wanted to do. And here we are. So let's get started with this week's pick. Okay. We're going to start with a Saturday afternoon game, Saturday morning game, 11 o'clock. First State Military at Christiana. First State Military 2-0. Christiana High School 1-0. Trey, what do you have in this first game?
Oh yeah, well, Christiana won their first season opener for their first season ever, first time since 2020. Quarterback Ikes Glasgow, he's getting some attention around Class A. But Saturday you have pass heavy First State Military Academy coming in and the number 3 rank. What's best about this game is we're talking about Christiana and First State Military, a potentially competitive game to pick. I'm going to take First State Military on the road.
Ben, who you got in this single A game?
Speaking of Marty, I think it was Marty Sheehan that brought up the possible leads, the headline to that game. And listen to this. Okay, so quarterback Glasgow led them. So Glasgow leads Christiana over Newark.
It was Marty.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Hey, good win for Christiana. First time they beat Newark in years. But also a very impressive win by First State Military. I stopped by that game on my way to Smyrna High, and they were down 7-6 at halftime. So that tells you both teams played really good defense in the second half, and it came down to a Hail Mary at the end of the game for First State to pull out the win. Both good defenses. Javion Pollard, he scored all 3 touchdowns for Christiana in that win over Newark. But Nate Price passed for over 100 yards in that game. And I'm with Trey on this one. I'm going to go with First State Military on the road to get the win.
Well, football's alive and well on Chapman Road. It's Christiana opened their season with a win over a longtime rival, Newark. The Vikings, look, they're a school that produced not only one, but 2 NFL players. And rivals Concord for the longest walk from the parking lot to the stadium. So I have watched more games at Coder Stadium than anybody in Sussex County. But it's going to take a similar effort for the Vikings to move to 2-0 as a solid First State Military team comes to Newark. Class 1A appears to have some of the best games this week. And it could very well, this game could very well come down right down to the wire. But again, I'd like First State Military to win on the road this weekend. I'm going to go with First State Military. Trey, another single A game, another big one. It's another 11 o'clock kickoff. It's Polytech at 1-0 versus Wilmington Charter at 0-1.
Yeah, Wilmington Charter knocked Polytech out of the state tournament last year in the semifinals. The Force hung tough with a good First State Military team, and Polytech came from behind on the road last weekend to beat J.M. Bennett in Salisbury. This week they go back on the road for that in Wilmington for that 11 a.m. start time. Poly has a big roster, and they're returning some key all-district players. I like Poly here in the redemption game.
Glenn, who do you got in the battle of the Tech School versus the Charter School?
Yeah, that's at number 4 against number 5 in our Super 7. And you're going to have Polytech next week. Correct. With Indian River. That should be a great 1A matchup, Benny. Again, the Force has a great defense. They've got a lot of people coming back on that side of the ball. I think Polytech's on a mission. Charter, as Trey mentioned, knocked them out of the tournament last year in the semifinals. You got the Balsarac brothers, the quarterback, and the wideout, Isaac and Simon. And Diamond, and how about Ken Valson? I hope I'm pronouncing his name right for the Panthers. 116 yards rushing last week. He could be the difference in the game. I'm going with the Panthers.
And not only did Charter knock them out of the semis, Poly had beaten them soundly early in the season last year. So these two teams, they split those meetings last year with Charter getting the one that counted the most with the playoff win. Charter is replacing some key players from last year, but they have home field advantage along with that 11 a.m. start. Polytech has faced adversity. They faced it last Friday night, coming from behind in the fourth quarter on the road to beat J.M. Bennett. I think that's the edge that's needed to win this game. I think it's going to be a good close game, and I'm taking the Panthers to get their second road win of the season. So let's move to our last single A game. It's going to be early college at 0-1 versus AI DuPont at 0-2. Trey Mitchell, this game will be up in Wilmington. Trey, who do you have?
Yeah, this is early college's only win in program history, but the Hornets were kind of in disarray this year. They had to change head coaches right before the season started. And AI was handled by a good Indian River team, but they were able to get a couple touchdowns against First State Military in week 0. I like AI at home here.
Glenn, Hornets and the Tigers.
Yep, two small rosters, Benny. Both of them only list 28 on their rosters on the website. This is probably going to be the best shot for one of these two teams to get a win this entire season. I like early college in a close one.
As we said, we stay here in single A, and how awesome is that? We're talking, when have we ever picked 3 single A games in the same week? This class is becoming competitive each week, and I believe that itself has made the reclassification a success. Big revenge game for the Tigers. Early college got their only win over AI last year while AI went winless. Revenge is best served cold, so add some ice to this drink. I'm taking AI to win here. Trey Mitchell, Conrad and Sussex Tech. I think Conrad is a single A team, Sussex Tech double A. It's the home opener for the Ravens.
Yeah, Sussex Tech is piling up points on offense. They're averaging 52 points in their first 2 games. Meanwhile, Conrad has a big win over McKean last week, pitching a shutout. Conrad has the challenge of playing up in class while being on the road in Sussex Tech's home opener. I like Sussex Tech at home here with the rate they're scoring. I'm going to take Sussex Tech.
Glenn, this is the last home opener on this field for the Ravens as they're building a new school. Stadium gets torn down. I know in a couple of years they'll build a new one. Does that mean anything for the Raven Nation?
Well, hopefully they build a nice big section in the press box for you to do some games there, Benny.
Yeah, really.
Conrad, the Red Wolves' fourth-year quarterback, Gabe Welch, he had a really good game last week, almost passed for 200 yards and 3 scores. The Ravens won easily over Del Castle, and they did it on the ground. Kyle Thompson, Dylan Platia, I guess I'm saying the name right. I like Sussex Tech at home. Conrad playing up, trying to get bonus points, but I'm going with the Ravens.
These two teams, they have thrown points up on the board on offense, albeit it's probably the first real challenge for either team this season. Conrad has the edge in this game, having earned the shutout in their only one. But the Ravens, like Trey said, they're averaging a lot. They're averaging 52 points per game. But they've let up scores in both games against winless opponents. Single A Glasgow scored 34 points on them in week 0. But I'm going to go home field advantage in this one as the Raven Nations are going to turn out for their last home opener in this stadium. Sussex Tech, they're going to move to 3-0. And now let's get to some really tough games. We're going to go up to Smyrna, 2-0 DMA versus 0-2 Smyrna. First time these two teams have ever met. Trey, who you got?
Yeah, I'd say DMA's playing with house money this week as they head into Smyrna. They won a big non-district game last week over Delaware, but they're on the road for the first time at Smyrna. The lack of scoring by Smyrna is a little concerning. We've seen them bounce back from 0-2 and even 0-3, but scoring just once in 2 weeks is a huge question mark for Smyrna. And I believe Smyrna's going to answer that question and get it fixed, and Smyrna's going to win.
Man, we've seen Smyrna. We've seen them down 0-3. We've seen them down 0-4, come back, make playoff runs. But we've never seen them where they've been shut out. What do you have here?
That's right. Mike Judy, that was the first shutout since he took over the program in 2014. Eagles are going to be smarting after the shutout loss to Salesianum. They played 2 very good teams, a top-ranked team from Pennsylvania and, of course, a number 1 ranked team in our Super 7, defending state champ Sal's. I saw some signs last week that Smyrna can move the ball. They did have a goal to go, and the defense played well in the first half. DMA is playing up a class. I don't think Smyrna is going to go 0-3, and Smyrna needs a win. They certainly don't want to lose to a Class 2A team. I got the Eagles in this one.
DMA made a statement last week to the other Class A adult teams with their 19-6 win over Delaware. Playing up in class this week, the Seahawks, nothing to lose here. But the Seahawks are headed into Duck Creek to face the Eagles that are coming off a rare shutout loss that all adds up to Smyrna winning the Battle of the Birds. I'm taking Smyrna here in this class game. And then next we have I'm sorry, we are back now. We did have one more Class A game. As St. Elizabeth is at Indian River. St. E's 0-1, Indian River 1-0, Trey.
Yeah, the Vikings make the long trip down from Wilmington to Dagsboro, where the Indians are flying high with that number 1 ranking in Class A on a 1-0 start. St. E's will have to contend with the running game with Devon Handy and Javion Chandler, plus quarterback Dylan Grice, who tossed 2 touchdown passes last week. I like the number 1 team in Class A, Indian River here.
Glenn, Indians and the Vikings.
Yep, Indians and the Vikes, and both teams have returning quarterbacks. Cole Andrews, a sophomore returner for St. E's, and they did a pretty decent job trying to stick with highly ranked Archmere, a 2A team, last week. But I'm going to go with Trey here. I like Indian River. I saw them play in the semis last year up at Tatnall, and Dylan Grice played a darn good game against the Tatnall Hornets. So I'm going to go with Indian River. That's a long road trip for St. E's, and the Indians should win this one.
St. Elizabeth, they're 3-2 versus the Indians in their most recent meetings over the last 4 or 5 years. Indian River returns a ton of talent. I think they return all of their skill players from last season and was one of the 2 Class A teams that actually competed with eventual champion Tatnall. Add to that, they have a roster of over 60 athletes this year, which is pretty big for a single A team. The number 1 ranking and the pretty potent run game. I like Indian River to win and remain number 1 in Class A this week. So let's move to a couple of our games of the week. Glenn, you'll have this game on 302 Sports. Trey, 6:30 kickoff. Appoquinimink at Dover. Appo 1-0, Dover 0-1.
Yeah, it's an interesting game here. Appo's put themselves on the football map in Delaware in recent years. The Jaguars want to get the ball to senior Noah Hoff and let him make plays. And Dover's kind of an unknown. They have a new head coach. They have some all-state skill players gone, and we really just have an 8-3 loss to an out-of-state team to judge them by. The Senators return class AAA lineman of the year, Michael Stevenson. And he plays on both sides of the ball, so I'm sure he's going to make an impact. But, I'm going to take number 5 Appo here.
Glenn, this is your game. You're going to call.
Yeah.
And we've seen these 2 play before, but we don't know much about either team.
Yeah, I mean, Appo had they ran up a lot of points, but it was against Odessa from Class 2A. They have to play that district game now in the Appoquinimink School District. And poor Odessa, now they have to play Middletown after they lost that game that you did down at the Castle. That place had to be rocking. Benny, probably the game of the year, early in the year, but for excitement value, you just can't push that one aside.
Yeah, you can't beat 3 seconds left.
No. And Trey's right. We don't really know much about Dover. New head coach. They lost to an out-of-state team up at Abyssinia in that Gridiron Classic. And then they had their game canceled last week. They were supposed to have their home opener against another out-of-state team. They should be good defensively. Trey mentioned Stevenson. Of course, Keegan Countryman is another good lineman. They have a good linebacking crew, and they're very, very athletic in the secondary. They're going to have to be. Appo has a lot of weapons. They have 2 quarterbacks. They have Howard transferred to Cy Drummond, who's a dual threat, or they can bring in a drop-back passer and Greg Nielsen, who played last year. They're loaded at wide receiver, not just Hoff. They have Griffith, Montabell, and Rogers, and they can run the ball too. They have a decent line. I like Appo to win a close one here at Dover.
And Glenn will have this game with Pat Guriantes from Dover. It seems like every year Dover is a mystery team. And here we are in 2024. They lost opening week, as you said, to an out-of-state opponent. Last week's opponent, game didn't happen. New head coach, top weapons are gone from the offense. But at the end of the day, the Senators have a huge enrollment, are always athletic, and return several top players on defense. Now we turn to Appo, a team that can strike at any time, no matter what their record is. Head coach Brian Timpson always finds an opponent to ruin their season every year. They too are athletic, and they're big. Close game, not much going on with either team, of course, means lean towards the home team, right? Well, I didn't learn my lesson last week. I picked against the Knights in the Castle. I'm taking Apple on the road. Appoquinimink is going to move to 2-0. Let's move to our downstate game of the week, and it's going to be the Red Line Lions at Lake Forest. Red Line 1-1. Lake Forest 2-0. Trey, who do you have?
Yeah, this game's probably the highlight of the schedule in Class 2A. Red Line is young, but they are big, athletic, and fast. Evan Budinger enters his third season as a starting quarterback. And they reached the state tournament last year and returned a lot of those players. Lake Forest is one of the best athletes in Class 2A, and Darius Miller and a healthy Aiden Young at fullback. Both teams have the ability to put points on the board. In this game, it might come down to defensive stop. I've been back and forth on this game. I've picked Red Line, I've picked Lake Forest, I've picked Red Line, I've picked Lake Forest. I think I'm going to go Lake Forest here at home. I like that backfield they got going there.
Man, who you got in this one? You've seen Lake Forest once already this year.
Yeah, we did them opening game up at Odessa, and they came from behind to get the win. Aiden Young broke off a 71-yard touchdown run in that game. Very impressed with them, and the difference in this game could end up being Lake's quarterback, Jackson Parson. He throws a good ball, and he can throw the deep ball. He found a receiver wide open in the middle of the field against Odessa, and that was another big touchdown. Red Lion, Evan Budinger, Trey said it. He's one of the most sought-after quarterbacks in the state. Listen, I picked against the Spartans last week in the state news. I picked them to lose to Caesar Rodney, and they went ahead and won. I learned my lesson. Not going to pick against them again. They're at home. I'm going with a home team, Spartans.
It's a 7 o'clock kickoff from Felton. I'll have this game with Jim Tack. I am just now getting over the weekend high from last week's finish between Middletown and Sussex Central. This one has the makings of a similar type game, possibly even higher scoring. Red Lion fell behind early to 3A Cape and Open and just fell short at the end. Lake Forest came from behind late to beat Odessa and then jumped out in front and early on a 3A Caesar Rodney team that held off the Riders for the win. So what does all that mean? I don't know. I picked against Sussex Central at home last week and lost. I picked against Lake Forest at home last week and lost. I picked DMA to lose at home and I lost. I'm taking my chances on the home team. Lake Forest defends Lakeland on Friday night. So glad so far this season. We've been doing this gig for quite a lot longer than me, but at least the live stream gig we've been doing for quite a few years now. And I'd have to say the most exciting first 2 weeks of the season that we've probably seen in a long time.
I agree with you. And it's good to see some of these 2A teams having the cojones to move up and take on 3A teams like a Laurel, like DMA. And now, there's some other teams are trying to follow suit. So I like to see that. The 3A teams, we usually feature them almost every week. So we're going to have a game with 3A teams this week. But looking ahead to next week, Benny, might be the first time we haven't had a 3A game. You're going to have a 1A game,
right,
maybe one of the best ones involving 2 downstate teams in Class 1A. And we're going to have a 2A game, Laurel traveling up to Caravel. I'm glad we can do this. We can mix it up
right,
and not just feature the Smyrnas and the Dovers and the Middletowns and the Souths.
right. Trey, you had to do a little more homework because being a Sussex County boy and teaching at a Kent County school, and we're starting to talk about Christiana and all these other schools up north. And so you had to do a little more, but don't you see that as a coach of another sport, of course, good to see it programs being on the come up?
Yeah, I mean, as a coach of another sport, you want to see your sport grow, and as far as football is concerned, it's great seeing these, these single A teams getting coverage and finding success and growing and challenging themselves, and it's good to see. I think every coach wants to see that in their sport. You can't get better if the other teams and other schools aren't getting better too. So it makes Delaware football better. It makes the fans want to watch more, and it's overall good for our student athletes.
Kind of like iron sharpens iron. Yep. And Glenn, these games that we are bringing, getting a chance to see, albeit free, getting a chance to see some of these teams that people people don't even know these schools exist, especially those small public schools upstate that at one time were huge public schools upstate, the Christianas, the Brandywine, the Concords. But one thing they're all fighting for is probably in single A this year. I would say Indian River, Wilmington Charter, Polytech, another good season. They're going to possibly move up a class.
Yeah, it is possible. I went to Polytech last year. We didn't stream the playoff game that they had with charter school Wilmington in the semis. The atmosphere was great, Benny. I think you're going to love that game next week when you have Indian River going up to Woodside to play Polytech. Yeah, it was a great atmosphere there. The fans got into it. The coaching staff, everybody in the press box, all the fans loved the fact that I was there. We're sporting my 302 shirt and giving them some coverage and some props. And of course, that was the first time they've ever made it the playoffs in school history. First time they ever won a playoff game. How about your first ever playoff game? You return the opening kickoff for a touchdown.
Right, right. Well,
So, you know, yeah, it's great to see the schools that weren't having success, weren't getting the numbers. They had the 3-class system, and so far it's working.
My very first live stream game, Woodbridge at Polytech on NFHS in 2014.
How about that?
Very first live stream game. I'll be back there 10 years later next week. So Glenn, thanks a lot. Shooting for that 5-3. Glenn was right in the nick of things 2 years ago when we started bringing on guests. Got robbed by a forfeit. You had the week where there was a forfeit and your game didn't count and got hosed. And Marty Sheehan jumped in front and took the title. Last year, Jason Winslow goes undefeated. Not so much last week, 5-3. So he opened the door for the guys this year. But like you said, this is a tough week. There's some good games out there this week. And I think it's going to be an exciting week 2 of high school football here in Delaware. So for Glenn Frazier, Trey Mitchell, I'm Benny Mitchell on Delaware Live, powered by 302 Sports. We'll see you all at kickoff.